Tonight, on the Wheel of Justice special.
I mean, I have nothing other than her, and I need her back.
From the archives, we go back to 1990, where the survival story of Jennifer Schuett begins. Now, all grown up, she takes us back to the night a man stole her from her bed. The night she was left for dead. After 19 years, the face in Jennifer's memory has a name, and police have a man in custody. The clues, the waiting, and what finally broke the case. That's coming up next on the Wheel of Justice special, Jennifer's Story. This is a KPRC Local 2 Wheel of Justice special, Jennifer's Story. Here is your host, Dominique Saxa.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. You know, we started the Wheel of Justice to help catch the fugitives hiding out in our community, to give police another outlet to finding wanted men and women, and to give victims a platform to tell their stories. Well, 3 years later, out of the hundreds profiled, 200 have been caught. Tonight, we share one of those stories, plucked from a child's memories, police reports, and even our own news coverage. It all adds up to a journey to justice for one little girl. KPRC Local 2 anchor Joel Eisenbaum has the story, Jennifer's Story.
In the summer of 1990, Jennifer Schuett was 8 years old, and she was counting down the days before starting third grade. But Jennifer never made it to her first day back at school. Someone had left her tiny, bruised, and broken body in an abandoned lot.
I could, through blades of grass, see vehicles going by.
She was just feet from moving traffic, within earshot of children playing.
There was a dog that kept coming up to me, barking and then running away, trying to tell his owner that something was wrong.
But the 8-year-old couldn't make a sound, couldn't move.
I knew I was gonna die. I knew I was. And all I did was just lay there and pray.
August 10th, 1990. Police say someone had taken Jennifer from her bedroom, raped her, cut her throat, and left her bleeding in this field. And while Jennifer lay here, helpless, 4 miles away, her mother found an empty bedroom.
I didn't hear anything. I got up in the morning and she was gone.
Elaine Schuett says her daughter often slept with her, but on that night, sometime around 2:30 in the morning, exhausted, Schuett sent a restless Jennifer to her own bed, in her own room, down the hall.
She's the only thing I have. I mean, that is my baby.
August 10th, 1990, the Dickinson Police Department got a call of a missing child.
And I have nothing else. I mean, it's just been us two together.
With no time to waste, seemingly everyone started looking.
Jennifer is 4 feet tall. She weighs 45 pounds. She has dark brown hair and blue eyes.
And I need her back.
But how does a child disappear in the middle of the night? Back then, neighbors at the Yorktown Apartments told us since the air conditioners were often broken, it wasn't at all uncommon to see windows left open overnight. In the heat of a Houston summer, it was the only relief. But was it also an entry point? A resident showed us just how easy it would be to reach in.
My bet is maybe the guy someone walked by who was drunk or on drugs.
The big question became, where was Jennifer?
It affected this community and the surrounding communities.
Everyone held their breath as the hours just ticked by.
Just about everybody out here has got at least 2 kids.
Heck, you don't expect this to happen. It's so close to you, you know.
Then, late in the afternoon, some news.
On the other side of town, Jennifer was found in a field off of California Street by some neighborhood children who were playing behind their house.
So this field was just like, one for them to run around and play in, and they had their own little hideout fort type of thing. Not too long ago, it was last year, I talked to one of the kids on the phone that had found me, and it was really emotional for me talking to him, and he was telling me that it was kind of raining that day. I think that they thought that I was dead.
She wasn't far from it, barely breathing, hundreds of fire ant bites, and tremendous blood loss.
I remember being put into the life flight helicopter. I remember them putting me into the elevator. I remember the first officer on the scene talking to me, telling me to stay with him, that everything was going to be okay. I remember hearing children's voices, but I don't actually remember them, coming up and finding me. My first memory is the first officer on the scene.
Paramedics rushed Jennifer by life flight to John Seeley Hospital in Galveston.
She was left in that field probably to die, and thanks to the Lord, that's the only reason she has lived.
Family and friends hurried to the hospital where no one seemed quite sure if Jennifer would survive.
Her injuries are a laceration to the neck with an open trachea.
She's just a baby, and it's not fair. They shouldn't do these to kids.
With Jennifer found alive, the next question to come was,
who would do such a thing?
Next.
She's in and out, in a lot of pain, and she cannot talk.
Investigators didn't know where to look. Who stole Jennifer Schuett from her bed? And what happened that left her naked, bloody, and dying in a field?
Slit my throat, basically from ear to ear, and left me there to die.
The answers come from an unlikely combination: a young girl who could not speak, and an artist just beginning her career with police.
The payoff would be so huge if I could do a good sketch, because this guy was a monster and I'd be able to find a monster.
The two struggle to put a face on the nightmare, a face that haunts everyone who has touched this case.
Next, when Wheel of Justice, Jennifer's story continues.
An empty field, the site of the brutal rape and attempted murder of a child, a story that rocked the very foundation of the small Dickinson community. Everybody wanted to know who had done it. The best chance to catch the attacker laid in the mind of an 8-year-old girl, a girl who couldn't speak. KPRC Local 2 anchor Joel Eisenbaum continues our story now with the artist police hope would unlock the clues hidden inside Jennifer.
Word of Jennifer Schuett's abduction and brutal attack spread through Dickinson. Mothers and children who called the Yorktown Apartments home were frantic.
It's terrifying, and it's scary to even live here anymore.
Everybody's boarded their windows. They've bought guns.
Could have been my little girl.
While the 8-year-old laid silent in a hospital room, her friends and neighbors were back home worried.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you doing? And I hope you feel well when you get out of the hospital.
Worried not only about Jennifer's survival, but what would happen next. Jennifer says she knows why it hit home.
I hear everybody knows everybody kind of thing that, I grew up playing sports with these people. I went to school with these people, and since pre-K on up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like everybody knows everybody, and when something happens like that in a small community, it affects everyone. Yeah.
Taken from her bedroom, Jennifer was discovered less than 4 miles away. Police mowed the field where she was found with her throat slashed, and they found a pile of clothes just 3 blocks away. But remember, it was 1990. DNA testing was not yet advanced enough to help. Clues at the scene were limited. No one had seen anything, and the only witness couldn't speak.
She's in and out, in a lot of pain, and she cannot talk, so there are some details that we haven't gone into with her, and we hope to later on this week.
Police needed something to go on, someone to search for. They needed a lead, so they called on one of their newest employees, Lois Gibson.
I'd been on the job less than 1 year when I got the call.
A painter for most of her life, Lois had turned to forensic art to help victims put a face on their attackers. Quite frankly, she was still trying to convince the police department she was useful.
I don't think people took my sketches seriously, and I understand back then I had just started.
Maybe not, but law enforcement was calling her more and more, and she got one of those phone calls August 14th, 1990, 4 days after Jennifer's attack. Lois found herself heading south to Galveston.
It was unspeakable, and I drove down. I just kept thinking, this is impossible that this girl's alive. I can't believe this happened.
Lois made her way to John Seeley Hospital, to the pediatric intensive care unit.
You could see the mother sort of willing her to live, and everybody, the staff, everybody like, she's going to live.
Lois says the only thing you could see through the tubes and bandages were Jennifer's eyes.
And I turn around and look at her great, big, beautiful blue eyes and just get punched in the stomach with, I can't believe that this happened to her. But that's part of my job, so I keep happy. When I want to cry, I don't cry. And I just I just went through that struggle, and she at least wanted to engage in this, which sometimes children don't. She wanted to draw the picture. She knew what I was going to do.
That was more true than Lois could have known at the time. Locked in tortured silence because of the wound on her neck, Jennifer says what she couldn't tell anyone then is she had a plan.
Ever since I was in the hospital, that's what I've always wanted and thought about, is him being caught so that he couldn't do this to anyone else.
And that meant remembering everything.
One of the nurses had a daughter, and as soon as I knew that she had a daughter, I kind of attached to her. Was so afraid that he would even go after her daughter. You know, just thoughts of that at 8 years old, thinking that he would just go for anyone that he could, or even come back for me, you know, and finish me off. I mean, I always have wanted to remember, because I've always wanted him to get punished for what he did.
She was so urgent about wanting to do a drawing.
So Lois picked up her books, and the two of them started.
I have a book with noses and lips and eyes and all kinds of features, and I show the witness, I showed her these pages and slowly allowed her to point at the different features. Of course it was frustrating, and she was so injured, and her mother was there and she couldn't talk, and nobody believes I can do this, and I was a rookie and I didn't have any confidence. Of course it was frustrating. That's just normal.
Even today, Lois remembers it all.
So I'd ask a question and she'd either mouth some words or she'd write and she'd point. It was very frustrating, and I'm sorry that she experienced it. She remembers the frustration. That's normal, but she didn't know it. Nothing was normal about her, about what happened to her. She was strong, and she was determined, and she was going to work hard. She was willing to work hard, and she was just so beautiful. Heartbreaking, beautiful eyes. I was really upset at how pretty she was.
In the end, this is the face they created.
It seemed like it took forever, but it probably did just take one really long, torturous hour.
And Lois and Jennifer weren't done. Jennifer remembered something else.
I hate doing cars. It's the worst thing for me to draw. I'd rather draw anything.
But she did it, and so did Jennifer.
And I have no idea how I did that well. I think one of the detectives got me a photograph of some kind of make that she thought it was like.
They drew the car Jennifer remembered from that night.
And it was kind of like, it's not perfect, but it's really close. And then to get the color, I just kept scribbling different colors and blending them together.
The two spent the most time getting that right.
So I kept mixing colors till she said that, and I circled it. And you can see a little fingerprint.
In the end, Lois walked away with what would be the first public glimpse of the little girl's attacker and his car.
When I showed up for that sketch, I knew the pressure was so big that the payoff would be so huge if I could do a good sketch, because this guy was a monster and I'd be able to find a monster, and the pressure was unbelievable. No matter how many years you've been on the job, you're not going to be ready for that.
In the days after that sketch, Jennifer continued to improve.
She is improving. As of yesterday, she began talking on her own. We feel with each day she is progressing, and she is remembering more and more each and every day.
I had no voice, and they said that I would never be able to talk again. By the grace of God, I started talking one day in the hospital, and I haven't been quiet since.
It has been 19 years now since Lois first walked into that hospital room. Today, the entire experience is tucked away in a well-worn file folder, a folder among thousands of other folders, faces without names, wanted men and women who've never been found.
That memory is one that every time I hit it, I pulled back like you touch a hot pot and you try not to burn yourself. I pull away and change the subject. In my mind, no, I pull away. I pull away. The special hell for me is I remember everything. I'll never forget this case.
Coming up.
No one who has come into contact with this case can forget it. Who was the man who stole a sleeping child? Who was the man who took her innocence and left her for dead?
Knowing who he is what I just want to be able to look him in the face.
Jennifer talks about what happened inside that car, the brutal details she refuses to forget. And we meet the two men who just may have finally found a name to go with that face.
I think that gives her some comfort that the case hasn't gone away.
Next, when Wheel of Justice, Jennifer's story continues.
Looking at Jennifer Schuett, you see a vibrant young woman. A small scar on her neck is really the only outward appearance of the horrifying event that has shaped her life. Tonight, she takes us back 19 years to the night a man stole her from her bedroom and tried to kill her. KPRC Local 2 anchor Joel Eisenbaum talked with her and the two men who are now trying to find justice for Jennifer.
That bright 8-year-old who survived a brutal attack as a kid is now 27 years old. Jennifer Schuett has grown into a woman while waiting for justice.
There's been times when it's been hard, but I like to think of myself as a strong survivor, and I don't really play that victim role.
From those darkest days in the hospital, Jennifer has had one thing on her mind: finding the man responsible for leaving her in that field to die. So she embraces those awful memories, no matter how painful they may be.
Yes, I want closure, but it makes me stronger and keeps me going knowing that I can help other children that are out there possibly being victimized. And I mean, there might be little girls out there that didn't make it out of his attack.
As far as Jennifer knows, her attacker could be 1,000,000 miles away, in jail, or maybe someone she sees every day.
It could be anybody. I mean, it could be my neighbor, it could be, you know, a guy at the grocery store, someone driving next to me, but I can't let it run my life. So I don't live in fear. I just know that one day justice will be served and that he'll be in jail. I don't let it run my life. I can't, because it would drive me crazy.
Jennifer's clues, like the description of the man, his car with the dents in the driver's side door, the tear in the front seat. She hasn't wavered on a single detail since she told police in 1990.
Knowing who he is what I want. I just want to be able to look him in the face. I don't really want to ask him why, because I just don't think there's any valid answer for that. Knowing that he's in jail and that he can't hurt anyone else is what I want more than anything. The road that we're coming down, that was the way he actually drove me.
Even today, Jennifer says she drives the route they took that night, and she still remembers every detail.
I was always terrified of the dark as a little girl, and why, I have no clue. But I always slept in bed with my mother, and that night I woke up and went into my own room, and the next thing I knew, I was being taken by him, and he put me in his car and drove off with me. He had my nose and mouth covered, so I couldn't really breathe. I couldn't scream for help.
She remembers he was calm.
He offered me candy. You know, he seemed like he was very comfortable in what he was doing. He asked me at one point if he was scaring me.
She remembers the knife he held against her throat and that he told her he was an undercover police officer.
I said, well, where's your gun then? And he told me it was in the back seat. So I leaned over the back seat to look for the gun, and he ripped my panties off.
After that, it gets blurry. There are just vague but agonizing images of the attack and the trip to the field.
I was unconscious, and all I remember is waking up to him dragging me through this field, and he left me over there in between some trees, where he slit my throat, basically from ear to ear, and left me there to die.
She could hear the children playing, a dog barking, but she couldn't lift herself up, and she couldn't make a sound.
I was basically being devoured by fire ants. I was just helpless. And I finally had the strength to reach up and touch my neck, and that's when I knew that he had slit my throat. But I couldn't really do anything about it. I just laid there until some children playing found me, And I think that was about 12 hours later.
Jennifer took us back to the apartment complex where she was abducted.
I've actually never been out of the car and come back, so I mean, it's a little weird, but you know, it's fine. I'm not emotional or anything.
The first memory from that night is right here.
I wasn't awake till about this point because I remember looking back, you know, and seeing my mom's car there. I looked up and saw his face, and I immediately tried to scream, but he covered my nose and mouth.
Jennifer could have put those memories in a box and buried them, but she says that's just not who she is.
I've always wanted to remember every detail that I could. I've always actually been scared of things being blocked out of my memory.
She wants it all crystal clear because one day she plans to sit in a witness chair face to face with the man who tried to kill her and tell her story one last time.
And I look forward to it.
Back in August, Jennifer shared the story with us for the first time on television, but she has said these words before.
She's been instrumental in some parts of the investigation.
She tells it again and again every time her case is passed to another hopeful investigator. The last time was more than a year ago when Dickinson police investigator Tim Cromie and FBI Special Agent Richard Renison were assigned Jennifer's case.
Like any crime, if it's not kept in the public's eye, people start to assume it was solved. People start to assume that there was a conclusion. And after time, it does fade away.
So what can change in 19 years? In a word, science.
On the evidence that we're testing right now, there's no way that could have been tested and processed back in 1990s.
You see, in that evidence box, along with those sketches and Jennifer's account of what happened, is a pile of clothes, a little girl's shirt, and a man's pair of underwear.
In 1990, DNA was basically in its infancy, and in order to obtain a DNA sample, you needed a large quantity of whatever, blood, some bodily fluid or semen. You needed a large quantity. Today, you can get DNA from a single skin cell.
So Renison and Cromie threw a Hail Mary pass. They were about to put all their faith in a tiny piece of decades-old clothing.
We're retesting those, and hopefully we're going to be able to get a DNA profile of the offender.
If there's ever been a case with an opportunity to get to a closure, this would be one of those cases.
As the pair of investigators waits to see if their work's paid off, the pressure to solve this case is overwhelming.
It's frustrating because you want closure, you want to do something. We all want to do more than what we're doing right now for Jennifer. It's not that we're not trying, it's just we're not finding the right information, we're not getting the right clues, we're not getting that break that we need. And that's frustrating because we know that Jennifer wants closure. We want closure for her.
The thought of being the one to get that answer, to name him, to arrest him, that's what they wanted.
We look very forward to that. That'd be one of the highlights of my career.
I'm hoping he's in jail, but if he's not, I'm confident he will be soon, and that gives me a sense of relief.
Next.
That relief comes sooner than anyone thought. Just weeks after our interview, that DNA sample that was too small 19 years ago comes back from the lab, this time with a name.
The profile was run against existing FBI databases, and a match was found.
A name belonging to a man who was not in jail, a man who was living a regular life in Arkansas.
Yeah, he would just sit over in his swing over there on the porch and play his banjo.
For investigators, everything begins to fall into place.
That's coming up next on the Wheel of Justice special, Jennifer's Story. Wheel of Justice, Jennifer's Story continues. Here is your host, Dominique Saxa.
The Jennifer Schuett case had so many clues, a detailed sketch of the suspect, a drawing of the car, even an eyewitness who remembered everything. All those details that for 19 years led nowhere, until one day last October when police got something they thought impossible, a name. KPRC Local 2 anchor Joel Eisenbaum continues our story.
As today, I received a phone call that an arrest in my case had been made.
That at 6:50 this morning, Detective Tim Cromie and Agent Renison with the FBI arrested Dennis Earl Bradford without incident.
And thank you wholeheartedly for keeping my case alive throughout all of these years.
A formal complaint was filed in Galveston County charging Dennis Earl Bradford with the attempted capital murder of Jennifer Schuett.
I hope that my case will remain as a reminder to all victims of violent crime to never give up hope in seeking justice.
On October 13, 2009, the 19-year-old cold case involving the abduction, rape, and attempted murder of 8-year-old Jennifer Schuett got a whole lot warmer.
It was without question one of those moments that all of us in law enforcement live for.
After almost 2 decades, Dickinson police detectives and really anyone who had touched the Jennifer Schuett case were blown away by the announcement. A 40-year-old man named Dennis Earl Bradford had been arrested in Arkansas.
Do you hope? Yes. Do you believe? Days like this makes you believe.
Captain Arnold Moreno worked Jennifer's case for 10 years. He says the arrest is like a ton of bricks being lifted off his chest.
One of the things that I told Jennifer is that we're not going to quit. Don't think because I have run into these obstacles that this is it.
It's just an exciting day for Dickinson Police Department to solve this crime. It's unbelievable.
News traveled fast, and so did the excitement. Lois Gibson, the artist who had drawn the image of Jennifer's attacker all those years ago, couldn't believe it.
That made my day, month, year, life. I mean, if that's the only case I ever did.
The arrest was big news, and things were about to get a whole lot more interesting. Dickinson Police Chief Ron Morales revealed a driver's license picture of Bradford from that long ago summer.
You can compare this for yourself. We find them remarkably similar.
Amazing, the talent. 1 year on the job, and my hands did that close. I still don't believe it. I get it out and I look at it and I gloat.
Feelings of deja vu continue with another picture. Remember that sketch of a car? This is Bradford that very same summer, sitting in a blue car that's eerily similar to that chalk drawing.
But that, to me, when I saw that right there, doesn't get too much closer than that. No.
And the hits just keep on coming as investigators continue to fill in the blanks. It turns out Bradford lived in these apartments just blocks from Jennifer Schuett's home and just miles from the field where she was left to die.
As part of the investigation, we didn't want to give away too much information before we got the affidavit and let anybody know that we were looking at him.
Putting aside the pictures, the most damning evidence, the piece that really landed Bradford in jail, his own DNA.
The DNA profile that was submitted and matched in this case, it matched a known person in that CODIS database.
The officers who caught up with Dennis Bradford say the real heroes in this case are the crime scene investigators here in Galveston County. You see, they collected evidence for tests that didn't even exist yet. And not only that, they kept it and preserved it for nearly 2 decades.
You have to understand that evidence was almost 20 years old. And to still have the DA up 20 years, that was just unbelievable.
The Galveston County Sheriff's Department collected the evidence at the scene and processed it and stored it, and it could not have been done any more perfect.
In 1990, labs needed large samples to even try to get a match. Today, all it takes is a single skin cell.
I don't know how they had the foresight or if it was luck or a little bit of both, but whichever the case is, they did it perfectly.
That's music to John Pruitt's ears. See, he's one of those Galveston CSI guys who collected that evidence.
It's important that we collect it, preserve it, to when we have to present it in court, there's no question about its integrity.
Pruitt is just one in a line of people who feels a sense of relief that this case may someday soon finally be closed.
We all did a good job. That, you know, we did what we originally were set out to do, and then now that there's going to be justice for her.
Dickinson police officer Tim Cromie and FBI agent Richard Renison did what all those investigators before them had tried to do. Cromie and Renison did what they promised. They made an arrest.
In that room that day, you could not help but be moved by their determination and their dedication to Jennifer's cold case.
Now it's up to Galveston County to try and get a conviction.
The quality of the DNA evidence is truly, I believe, to be outstanding in this case. I mean, it put us over the edge as far as being able to proceed with obtaining the affidavit for arrest. So combine that with obviously Jennifer's knowledge about the events of the night and what happened to her, her drawing, and her recollection, specific things that we can't really discuss at this time. We're very comfortable with the charge, and we're looking forward to prosecuting the case.
And it looks like the star witness is ready to testify.
This event in my life 19 years ago was a tragic one. But today, 19 years later, I stand here and want you all to know that I am okay. I am not a victim, but instead victorious.
So, Joel, you were at that press conference. What was that like?
Probably the most memorable press conference I've ever been to. First of all, it was a tiny room. We were all jammed in there. We're talking about journalists, photographers, police, and then really a grand entrance from Jennifer Schuett. Nobody was quite sure what she was going to say, but you could instantly feel it. I mean, we're talking about probably 5 feet between myself and Jennifer, and you didn't even really have to look at her face. You could just hear her words, and you'd know that she had been waiting for that moment for 20 years.
You know, when I saw that sketch and then the driver's license picture of the suspect, I mean, that's uncanny.
I mean, it really is. It's almost a spitting image. What really got me, though, was the sketch of the car.
Right.
And you got to keep in mind, we're talking about an 8-year-old kid who's in the intensive care unit at a hospital, critical condition, throat has been slashed, she can't talk, and yet she has to figure out a way to communicate with a perfect stranger and try to hammer out a decent sketch of the suspect in the car, and what they came up with was amazing.
It's remarkable, and I think a lot of people are wondering, who is this Dennis Bradford?
Exact same question we had. As soon as we saw that arrest video in Arkansas, North Little Rock, brought him in, we saw him in the handcuffs, we wondered if this is the guy who did this, and police say that it is the guy, we need to know what this man has been up to in the last 20 years. So we went up to Arkansas, essentially, and we were charged with finding that out.
A lot of digging on your part, Joel, and when we come back, we're going to have much more about where Dennis Bradford has been for the last 19 years. It's something you don't want to miss.
Coming up.
We follow Dennis Bradford's footsteps from Dickinson to Hot Springs and finally Little Rock, Arkansas, through 2 marriages and a prison sentence.
At the time of the offense that he's now accused of, he was no longer under any supervision. His time was up.
That's coming up next on the Wheel of Justice special, Jennifer's Story.
A mystery that has haunted the Dickinson Police Department for almost 2 decades gets a break in the case. New DNA results bring back a name. That name takes investigators across state lines to arrest a man they say has been living on borrowed time. KPRC Local 2 anchor Joel Eisenbaum follows the trail of Dennis Bradford from Dickinson to Little Rock, Arkansas.
Well, the first day we were just in total shock.
The victim said that she never gave up hope.
Everything about it is tragic.
As today, I received a phone call that an arrest in my case had been made.
I said it's like a bad dream, and you're waiting to wake up from it.
Dennis Bradford's arrest made national headlines. A 19-year-old cold case cracked.
30, 40 years ago, a case like this probably never would have been solved.
Police say DNA did it, and now the man police believe brutalized a child has been brought back across state lines to Galveston County, a place he once called home.
He lived in the trailer park down the road, and every now and again he'd come by, and play his guitar.
That was in Dickinson in the late 80s, 5 years before young Jennifer Schuett would be left in a field just miles away.
He was calm, not temper, he didn't have a bad temper or anything like that.
Melinda Armbruster says the then 16-year-old Bradford was friendly. After hearing his name and seeing his face on TV, she realized the man in handcuffs was actually her old friend.
Were you shocked when you put 2 and 2 together and you knew it was
Well, yeah. It's like he lived right down the street from us.
So if investigators are right and Bradford is their man, where has he been all this time?
Yeah, he would just sit over in his swing over there on the porch and play his banjo.
And how could a man accused of kidnapping, raping, and nearly killing an 8-year-old girl have seemed so normal for so long to so many people.
The allegations don't match up, let's put it that way. I mean, it's not the guy that I know.
As the news spreads, more shocked neighbors, but this time in another state, Arkansas. That's where Bradford's been living, right across the street from Bill Musham.
Dennis is a very outgoing, very nice guy, great neighbor.
But just the same, 20 years after Jennifer's attack, it is Bradford being escorted by police and FBI agents from Arkansas back to a Texas jail.
It's probably a shock to everybody with, reading the allegations. It's bizarre. That's probably a good way of putting it.
He's just a big old teddy bear.
This is where Bradford worked as a welder, right up until the day he was arrested. Only nobody at this North Little Rock fence company had a clue about his past. But in hindsight, there were hints.
I mean, he's told me I've done some bad things in my days, Ronnie, that I'm not proud of.
For 8 years, Ronnie McPherson worked side by side with Dennis Bradford, and never once did he press his friend for details. The Dennis he knew was helpful, friendly, and funny.
My grandkids loved him. I don't see how he done it. I don't see how I could keep something like that inside of him without telling somebody.
Daisy, Daisy.
In fact, shortly after the Jennifer Schuett crime in Dickinson, it appears Bradford essentially started over in Hot Springs, Arkansas. In the mid-90s, he bounced between jobs, met a woman, married, had 2 kids, and was otherwise unremarkable. But on April 16, 1996, we know exactly where Dennis Bradford was. This spot. Back then, it was a local dive called Gators, and that night, he met a woman.
For some odd reason, she feels that it's okay to go for a ride with this guy.
That decision proved nearly fatal for that woman. In what would turn out to be an eerily similar crime to the Schuett case, police say Bradford kidnapped, raped, and terrorized his victim.
Takes a knife and holds it to her throat, telling her that he's going to kill her.
But he didn't. Instead, according to a police report, Dennis Bradford, after beating, choking, and ordering the young woman to clean the blood off herself, let her go. Right here at this Hot Springs racetrack, Bradford then drove home to his wife and children.
He was convicted of kidnapping back in 1996 and was given a 12-year sentence.
We asked Dinah Tyler with the Arkansas Department of Correction to review the ex-con's prison record.
He had some rule violations, but none of them was violent, and all of them pretty much were for not following orders, which was typical.
Serving a third of his sentence, at that time pretty normal in Arkansas, Bradford was paroled in April 2000.
Had he been in violation of the terms of his parole, he would have been revoked and sent back to the Department of Correction.
Put an asterisk next to that statement because we dug up a North Little Rock police report from 2001. It turns out Bradford was convicted of misdemeanor DUI, but it didn't bust his parole.
I felt like, I needed to give the guy a chance.
Bradford caught another break that year. Brother and sister Billy and Cheryl Briggs decided to hire him to work at their fence company. They say Bradford made it clear he was a convicted felon, but quickly fit in.
Never gave anybody any trouble other than, flirting with the girls, but...
Really? I mean,
we loved him.
They weren't alone. Bradford found a new love. He got married again and started another family and inherited 3 stepchildren. One of them answered the door.
Well, right now we have no comment to say to anything.
Nothing at all?
No. I apologize. It's been pretty hectic.
The people in Bradford's life are left wondering just who the man was they were calling their friend and neighbor. For some, seeing him as anything else just isn't possible.
I'm going to wait and see. I certainly hope it isn't true. But we'll see what happens with the court system, how the evidence lays out, and just take it from there.
If the evidence is as strong as the FBI says it is, Dennis Bradford's likely never to set foot in Arkansas again. 19 years of borrowed time, Jennifer Schuett says she paid for.
I hope that my case will remain as a reminder to all victims of violent crime to never give up hope in seeking justice, no matter how long it may take or how hard it may be.
I feel sorry for everybody involved. If he's the one, I'm glad they were able to solve the case, if he's the one.
What's so striking is that this tragedy is not just Jennifer Schuett's, but everybody who was connected to Dennis Bradford. I mean, they all got blindsided.
Yeah, you're right. And there are a lot of people who are connected to Dennis Bradford, not just his coworkers, but we're talking about his family. He's a father of 5, essentially. He has 2 of his own children and then 3 stepsons. Imagine that going through a situation where your dad is suddenly taken away from you, supposedly for something he did 20 years ago. I mean, each of these kids, his wife, even his ex-wife, is now going through that situation. His best friend who I talked to in Arkansas said, I can't believe it. That's not the Dennis that I knew. I just can't believe it. One person who wasn't in your story was Dennis's first ex-wife. What was her take on all of this? She didn't want to talk on camera per se, but I did meet her in Hot Springs, and she said, look, I'll tell you what I know, and that is I remember perfectly when Dennis was arrested for that crime in Hot Springs. I remember that night to the T. Dennis didn't come home, and that wasn't all that uncommon, but what was different this time is that police came looking for him, and she said that was essentially the end of our marriage. Have you had a chance to talk to Dennis Bradford at all? I haven't talked to Dennis Bradford, but it's not for lack of trying. I've written him letters. I've tried to get a hold of him through his lawyer, but to no end. That's not to say, though, that I haven't been following the case. In fact, just a few weeks ago, there was a pretty interesting development. His lawyer has apparently filed a motion now for examination regarding insanity. So this could very well be part of their defense when that trial comes up. All right. Excellent work, Joel. Well, I'll bet somebody else who's counting down the days leading up to this trial is Jennifer Schuett, and we're going to find out how she's using her story to help others. Stay with us. Jennifer Schuett has spent most of her young life waiting for a shot at justice. But now that it looks like she just might get it, she talks about why it's so important.
I owe that to other victims, you know, to not be quiet. I need to do this for other people and for myself.
That's coming up next on the Wheel of Justice special, Jennifer's story.
To be a survivor takes a huge strength of will. To find that in an 8-year-old is inspirational. You can see it in this picture, still connected to tubes and IVs. She stands victorious. KPRC Local 2 anchor Joel Eisenbaum ends our story where it began, with a girl, now a woman, named Jennifer Schuett.
The Use Your Voice shirts, and how I did that to encourage others to speak out along with me.
Use your voice. That's been Jennifer Schuett's mission statement since she was 8 years old, when a brutal attack ended with her throat being cut. Doctors thought the little girl singing just days before would never speak again, but young Jennifer was bound and determined to catch her attacker.
I have told my story to so many people in hopes of remembering everything and never forgetting anything, because I just want to be able to get this case solved, and I know that the more I can remember, the easier it might be.
She started a website called Justice for Jennifer.
And I use my website just as a tool, you know, so that everybody can read about my story. I mean, I even have my website on the back of my car, just so people will go to it.
What began as a way to get the few pieces of evidence from her case out into cyberspace has become a light in the dark for other victims, those too afraid to use their own voices.
People email me through my website and remind me that I told them my story back in 6th grade and got them to open up, and that they had, you know, been molested, and that even in, you know, 6th grade I was encouraging people to go to the police. I helped them, and now they're writing me and reminding me of those things. 19
years later, you can still see the marks left by her attacker's knife, still see the hole left by the tubes in the hospital.
People have asked me if I wanted to get plastic surgery to cover it up or anything like that. I would never do that. It's just a survival story now.
A story Jennifer has kept close, but not just to be ready for her day in court.
I do feel like, being a survivor, that I owe that to other victims, you know, to not be quiet, because being quiet in my head means that I'm letting him win, and he's not going to. This is a battle that he will lose ultimately, and I need to do this for other people and for myself.
A man has been arrested. A court date is on the horizon, but it could be another year of waiting for Jennifer before another call to tell her story again. But this time she will be in the witness chair, feet away from the man charged with kidnapping her, raping her, and then trying to silence her forever. Jennifer says she can't wait to tell her story one last time.
I just want to be able to move on, not leave behind my story and everything, but just kind of knowing that he's in jail and that he can't hurt anyone else is what I want more than anything.
The trial of Dennis Bradford could start as early as November. To learn more about Jennifer's fight for justice and her desire to encourage other victims to use their voices, to speak up and to stand strong, there is a link to her website, Justice for Jennifer, under the hot button at click2houston.com. And you can see more of the Wheel of Justice right here, weeknights at 10 p.m. For all of us here at Local 2, good night.